All right. Hope everybody's having a great day. It is Wednesday. I've got to say, it is hard to believe that, I'm taking a look at the date. It's almost the middle of November. I mean,
Hope everybody's having a great
before
day.
before we know it, we're gonna blink and it is going to be January. It's hard to believe how fast this year is, but also just how fast the end of this year is going.
Yep.
Um, So definitely moving fast. And I'm very excited for today's topic. I've got Mr. Bill Farrell here. I will have Bill give an introduction in just one moment. One of the things that we all know that we've got lots of tools in our stack, especially on the RMM side. However, there are other tools available such as Intune and the whole plethora of 365 tools that are out there that I don't know that we're all necessarily taking full advantage of and really leveraging the tools that are out there. It's built into the offering for 365, and a lot of times when I talk with MSPs, some might not be using it at all. Some are maybe dabbling with it, and then you've got some that are really embracing it. So it's really kind of a mixed bag. Um, it's a great way to complement, doesn't replace by any means, an RMM or other tools in your stack. But as far as helping to automate configuration, strengthen compliance, and also just improve overall client outcomes, it can provide a ton of value. And that is why I have with us today Bill. And Bill, before we kick things off, maybe you could give a little background about yourself. That'd be awesome.
Sure. So, I've been in the industry probably for about 20 something years now. I started my career in the MSP world for probably, I don't know, 12, 15 years. So I'm very familiar with the space, some of the challenges MSPs have, and I still talk with MSPs now to help them with a various degree of things. So primarily I'm an Azure architect and I work also in the modern workplace on the MS side. That's where the Intune component comes in, but that is primarily what I am doing today at the almost end of 2025, as you had mentioned.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And so let's just kind of jump in. I did some of an introduction as far as how MSPs are using most of the tools that are available to them that are part of their existing stack. Let me turn this volume down here because it continues to be. There we go. But I would have to suspect that you're seeing very much the same thing where you've got tools like Intune that just aren't being leveraged.
Yeah.
What are some of your thoughts on that as far as why it's not being leveraged, and what do you see as far as the benefits of being able to pull that into the mix as far as the management stack?
Cool. So, good point. A lot of times people don't understand all the things that they get from the licenses that they currently have. So, just to level set, everyone understands what Intune is, right? And what it is not. So that's a very important distinction. So one common thing that people, I find in my experience, that kind of get a little confused on is that they think Intune is an imaging product or service. It's not, right? It's a
Yeah,
post-configuration deployment and management tool. It's not a drop-in replacement for an imaging service like a fog server or Acronis Snap Deploy or MDT or any one of those tools that you would use for an image where you would take golden image, you sysprep it, you dump the image somewhere in a centralized server, you pixie boot an endpoint, and then you image the machine, right?
yeah,
Intune is going to kind of go from that place forward, where it's going to do post-configuration deployment, sorry, post-deployment configuration. There we go. And the state management after that. So if you image something, it's a one-time thing done, right? You win the
yeah,
lotto, you get one lump sum, doesn't keep paying you, right? It's not doing anything after that. So Intune is kind of like your current state management going forward, whether you're doing policies, application deployment, security hardening, whatever you're doing inside of that tool, it's going to consistently manage the device. And it's also beneficial for folks that are in compliant environments that they say, okay, well, I have to file HIPAA or PCI or some kind of NIST compliance where I need to do certain things and I need to provide evidence that I'm doing it. You simply pull a report and push it out and say, okay, Intune's doing it, and here's my evidence of why and how it's doing it. So that's a very important distinction. I find that people sometimes don't correlate very well. And I also think that from like a licensing perspective, a lot of folks that I'm sure people on the call have seen that the licensing that customers have is a gigantic mess, right? They've
Right.
got SKUs of this and SKUs of that. They're not using this. They're paying for that. It's kind of a little bit of a mess. So business premium is the best dollar for the value, right? Because Intune is part of that. It also covers, if you're an AVD shop, covers your Windows 11 license as well. So you have full rights for that, as well as your shared computer activation for Office. So one of those things that someone wrote something. So one of those things that yeah. So Autopilot is it's definitely there's like a generation 2 now, they call it, and Intune actually kind of changed the underlying way of how they actually push out policy. MMP-C, if you ever seen that term, that's what it is. It's meant to like happen more frequently, right? One thing that you're definitely going to have a challenge with in terms of Autopilot is what Autopilot is, it's effectively touch-free deployment. So if you do what's called self-deploying mode, it used to be called white glove, where you can simply just drop a machine, assuming it's been preloaded by the vendor or the VAR into Autopilot, the hash upload, we should talk about that as well. You simply drop it on someone's desk, they connect to the internet, they sign in, it deploys the machine, installs their applications, configures it, drops them at the desktop, and they're done, right? That's what the self-deployment mode is. But ideally, when you're doing Autopilot, do not do hybrid AD join. You're going to have a bad time. It's a very, very well-known fact. You go to Google, says Autopilot, hybrid AD join problem, and you'll see tons of threads. You'll see Reddit threads, you'll see everything, right? And you'll see mobility MVPs that'll tell you if you can avoid doing hybrid AD for Autopilot, probably should. So one of the things people do with hybrid AD is they have to access on-prem domain join stuff, file shares, SQL, stuff like that. A better alternative for that, there's a feature called Cloud Kerberos Trust. And what that will do is that will allow, assuming that the user on the Entra join machine that you're now just Entra joining, not hybrid joining, is synced to Entra via the Cloud Sync or Entra Connect, is that what you'll do is that it'll actually issue a Kerberos ticket against the device, and it will allow them to seamlessly authenticate to an on-prem resource, file share, SQL using Windows Auth, all without being hybrid AD joined. So the fleet in the field that never goes to the office is simply just Entra only. So that's one thing that Autopilot can kind of help you do. Right. I'm trying to think of what else. I'm trying to answer the question that someone had asked. But yeah, the holy grail effectively is just dropping it on someone's desk or drop shipping it to them, right? The vendor is going to preload the Autopilot hash. You have a profile that's assigned for that. You're going to rename the machine using a template, depending, like, site name dash, and then, serial number or whatever your standard is. And then bam, they sign in and they get all the stuff deployed and they're done. Right? Your serial is another variable you can use, right? Random is another one.
Again?
Yeah.
The
Go ahead,
option,
Mike.
the option to not AD join them, but then have them still be able to use resources. What's that option called again?
It is called Cloud Kerberos Trust. Now, in the past, you would do key trust, you would do certificate trust, but it also requires, like, you need to have an on-prem, a CA, right? A lot of people are not familiar with how to manage certificate authority, how to create templates, how to publish them, do all these things. The Cloud Kerberos Trust, it's effectively just 2 PowerShell commands. And what it will do is it will create a virtual RODC. So it'll say Azure AD Kerberos. Azure AD still lives, right? Commandlets and all those things. It's still not all Entra everywhere, right? Mm-hmm. But it'll create a virtual RODC. And the reason why it's an RODC is because it just needs to issue tickets. It doesn't have to change anything. And that's what's facilitating issuing the Kerberos ticket for the endpoint. So that's
So when
effectively
that
how it works under the hood.
so when that machine, so we Entra join it,
Mhm.
user logs in, they go into the office the first time.
Mhm.
Does group policy map drives for them and all that kind of stuff?
Nope, the machine is not domain joined. You would use there's a site that someone has for Intune drive mappings. It'll translate what you're doing into an Intune configuration policy or a PowerShell script, and that way you can actually assign it inside of Intune. I think that the general gist of what Microsoft is pushing for, that to get away from legacy drive mapping to go with SharePoint and just do like, the SharePoint, the OneDrive mapping in a SharePoint library.
Yeah, I'm going through exactly what you're talking about. My two largest clients, of course, have domain environments. And I did the hybrid thing because there's so many users having the password sync and all that made sense.
Yep.
But I'm
Sure.
experiencing exactly what you're talking about, where half of the machines after a day pull into Intune and are good, and the others just
Yep.
don't. So I've been manually mapping the SharePoint document libraries, but there's no rhyme or reason that I could figure out as to why some worked and others didn't.
Right. So I'll give you, there's a link that I could share with you that it effectively just generates the configuration. You can also export like if you're doing it in a GPO now and you say, hey, I want to shift from GPO to use Intune, you can ingest the GPO into that site and it will just spit out the configuration policy for you to use, or the PowerShell script for you to use on the Intune side, which is it's just an apples to apples comparison. So that way,
Yeah, that part of it I'd kind of figured out between the RMM and everything else. But it's mostly the drive mapping versus SharePoint document library mapping issue that I'm struggling with.
Yeah, one of the things that there's a couple of caveats with the SharePoint drive mapping with some limitations. 300,000 files across all of the shared libraries. So if you have an environment where they just have a ton of files, right, which is normal, right? I have a ton of PDFs and Word docs and whatever, right? Technically, the soft limit is 300,000. And if you go above that, it'll tell you flat out in the Microsoft doc says it is not supported. Expect weird behavior. Flat out, and in a nice, technical way, right? It's like it's going to be weird, right? It may not work, it may not be consistent, which effectively defeats the purpose. So one of the other things that you're limited on, if you do that in OneDrive, the document library mapping, I forget the term that they call it. Versioning is not a thing, right? So like when you would go on the web or if you do it through Teams, you have versioning. That doesn't happen. And when you can do multiple people in the same document, like you can see editing in real time from other people. Same thing with like if using like Google Sheets, for example, you can see like this one tile is, Joe Smith is here and he's green, and then Bob Dole is here and he's an orange tile, whatever. None of that is supported. It's essentially creating a file lock. The same would do with like an SMB share. So those are some of the things that you're limited on, but it does give you to have the quote unquote drive map via, it's like OneDrive, shared documents, and then it breaks it down from there. So there's some third-party stuff that works around this. There's a product called Z Drive. It's ZEE Drive that it will map it as a drive letter and it doesn't have that limitation whatsoever. And you can have like permission assignments, who gets what, who gets where, and stuff like that. But obviously it's a third-party thing. You pay an additional license for it. It's not expensive, but some people prefer that as well because they like to have, or they have a user base that flat out refuses to not have drive letters, but they don't need to have servers on-prem and AD because there's no need for it, right? It's purely Entra only, right? They're not going to pay for server management. They're not going to pay for an RMM agent on the server or EDR, whatever, right? It's just simply just almost like a SaaS only environment. You know what I mean? So that's some people prefer to do it that way as well, but it's up to you. It's really, there's a couple different ways. It's the same way with like Intune, right? A lot of people don't realize is that you can also baseline stuff with Intune if you have multiple customers. There's a bunch of tools that will do that. There's a PowerShell script that'll import and export certain things, and you can just stamp them on other environments. There's other third-party tools like Inertio, for example. If you use that for AVD, they also have a very good Intune function built in, and you can create security baselines. And you can apply it to multiple customers, so it's like a one-touch deployment. Here's my standard. I'm turning on BitLocker. I'm doing security baselines to make sure my attack surface reduction rule is turned off. No unsigned applications on flash drives, and things like that are security baselines. And you can create effectively a configuration baseline. Yeah, SIP is another one too, by the way. That was actually my next point. So good, you beat me to it. But and it can also create configuration drift awareness. So if you have an internal IT user that happens to be a little bit, ooh, I wonder what this is, or ooh, I don't like this, and he has the access to do that because it's like the owner of the company or like their internal admin, you'll get notified if drift happens. Right, that doesn't happen natively. So that's what some of those, like the Nerdio tool, can do that. I think SIP has the baseline you could definitely apply. I don't know if they have configuration drift detection like Nerdio does, but it is another really nice tool. And SIP has some other things you can manage, like Exchange Online all in one place and do all that stuff. Anyone that is not familiar with like what GitHub Actions are, or just that type of thing in general, use the one that you pay for like $100 a month, because you have to update it on your own. And if you don't know how to do CI/CD, you're going to have a really bad time. So that's my 2 cents for that.
One thing I wanted to throw out there too, on the business side, as we're
Yep.
talking about, these scenarios where we're, dropping their on-prem servers, moving to the cloud, that does
Yep.
not mean a loss of revenue. That does not mean that, that all of a sudden you no longer have a physical box there that you're managing. So, you're going to be bringing in less, MRR. I mean, at the end of the day, you're getting a whole different environment. It doesn't, eliminate the work, it changes it, so there's still configuration, there's still security, there's all the backup, access control, especially, think about the compliance component of it. There's a ton there, integration, everything is still there. So, just because you eliminate a server doesn't mean you eliminate that monthly recurring revenue.
Right.
Nothing changes from that perspective. So I just wanted to make sure that on the business side that we don't lose sight of that.
Yeah, and that's a good point, right? Because certain people, it depends on how they're doing their billing, right? If they're billing like per endpoint, are they billing per user? Like what does that look like?
Yeah.
Because let's say you have to keep an AD environment because you have like some legacy nonsense application that was written in 1934 that they have to use, and you want to, like, let's say you want to move it to an Azure. I see this stuff all the time. And you go, well, my per user or per endpoint billing model is now blown out of the water because now my cloud cost is astronomically high. Typically, it's because they don't know how to provision things correctly, or they may have to ship what they're doing. But yeah, that's the nice thing. If you're dropping all your servers, you can still build them as a per user. Okay, like your contract is it's $100 per user, right? It covers like their licensing and the support and whatever, or whatever, however you're billing that out, and you can still keep a pretty good margin by doing that. And your administrative overhead is a lot less
Yeah.
because there's no servers to manage at that point if you're going Intune only. So.
Yeah. And as we are continuing about this call, any questions that you have, please feel free to either jump on camera, voice, or even just chat. However you prefer, that would be great. Brad has got a question here. Best on-prem setup for SMB that doesn't have server OS, but does have on-prem share such as QuickBooks Database Manager.
Okay.
Thoughts,
So
Bill?
sure, I can answer that. Because I actually have done several accounting practices that do QuickBooks and Lacert and ProFX and whatever. But so ideally, here's the thing. So the thing to remember too is that Entra does not support NTFS permissions at all, right? Kerberos doesn't exist. There is Entra ID with Kerberos, but it requires Active Directory to actually issue the ticket. So realistically, I don't really understand why it's an option, but it is. So if you want to run the QuickBooks Database Manager and you want to have a file share drop there, you can't host it on SharePoint or OneDrive. QuickBooks will flat out tell you you can't do it on cloud storage like OneDrive or Google Drive or Dropbox or any of those other variants, right? I find, because you can kind of get a little bit crafty with the permissions, like using getackle, which is a PowerShell command. But the problem is that there's no NTFS support, so it gets a little swirly. And if it's on an actual server, as opposed to like an Azure file share, you have to effectively give everyone access to it. And then QuickBooks will decide, if I open this company file, then boom, I get in. So what you could do from a security perspective is that you can use Azure Files for that, okay? So you have your server, which doesn't have to be huge, doesn't have to be very powerful, because it's a database manager. And if you don't have 300 company files, it doesn't really have to be a rock star, right? So what you would do is that you can have Azure Files, just purely Entra authentication only. And then at the share level, you assign, there's 3 SMB permissions are built in RBAC roles. There's SMB contributor, reader, and elevated contributor. So SMB reader is reader access. Contributor is essentially modify or read write, and elevated contributor is full control. So you would delegate the permissions on that share at the Azure RBAC level, and then you would simply just mount it to that server. One of the benefits of that as well is that if anyone that doesn't know, Azure VM SKUs have a limitation of like network throughput, disk throughput. Disk throughput is typically the most common thing people get wrong. So if you have a requirement for more than 50 meg per second for everything, Azure Files, if you hook it in there, it's not limited to the VM SKU. It's limited to how much IOPS you're having it on the right. You can use ICACLs, right? That's another thing that you can do as well. The challenge with that is that a lot of folks are not very comfortable with command line. If you are, amazing, right? Also, set ACL, set ACL is the PowerShell variant of ICACLs. Same idea. So that's if anyone wants, that's actually another good way of doing it. But again, you have to be familiar. If it breaks, you have to know what you're looking at to fix it. So when it comes down to it, is that you could put in the coolest, fanciest solution you want, but if you don't know how it works and how to troubleshoot it, it's not going to work out too well for you. And then your customer is going to get frustrated, and you can kind of see where it snowballs from there. So hopefully that answers your question.
Excellent. Other questions as we continue on here?
What is the best way to migrate existing, local AD joined computer to Azure? I did one a year ago and it totally fragged everything.
Good question. So are you talking about servers or endpoints, like client OS or server OS? Or
Yeah,
both?
client computer. So, everybody's moving over to, SharePoint and stuff, doing away with their file server, but they're already, AD joined to the local server. Want to join them to Entra or Azure.
Right. So there is a tool called ProfWiz, which will migrate their profiles.
That's what I use, and it totally.
It's not a perfect science, right? Nothing is, because it's written by people, and people are imperfect by nature. But in my experience, that's the best tool that I personally have seen. I've seen where, let's say, depending on how Office is licensed, and you use ProfWiz to move it over, it'll break the activation, and it refuses to reactivate. You have to reinstall Office. I've seen things like that happen before, but your experience is definitely going to vary when you use that tool, but that's just bringing over profiles, right? So for the most part, I've had pretty good success with it, and it's free unless you want to script it for mass deployment. Then you need to have the license or the pro version. I'm sorry, I don't know exactly what the professional version is called, but
Yeah, I do have that. But
good.
what I use the tool not only to migrate the profile, but also to do the Entra ID, join.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And somebody else told me to manually, break the, AD join on first, then join the computer to Azure or
Mhm.
Entra, and then use ProFwiz to bring and attach the profile over. But I haven't
Right.
tried that yet.
You can do that as well. I technically prefer to do that because it's a little bit cleaner when you do it that way. Because if it's all in one swift motion, if you will, I find it's not as stable as not stable is not the right word, but it's not as good. It's not the right word here. I find that doing the manual disjoin and then the join through settings, account, connect, worker, school. But it's also like if you have a handful of machines, that's fine. But if you have 5,000 machines, that's not okay, right? That's when you're going to script it and use that. So it's really kind of up to your discernment which method you go with. But I find that the manual disjoin and then the rejoin tends to work a little bit more efficiently, less issues, stuff like that. But there's no wrong answer there.
Jay, any other questions in that area?
No.
So did that you going back to that one, Jay, did that kind of shy you away from doing more of those, or you just haven't had
Yeah.
any? Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I mean that happens, right? I mean, we get stung in those type of scenarios and don't want to look bad. We want to do our best, and yeah. Bill is available. Just wanted to throw that out there. I can throw Bill, if you could throw maybe a contact information into chat, that'd be great. So, if anybody is in need of some support for any projects, Bill is available outside of speaking here for us. So feel free to reach out to Bill in those type of scenarios. So, um, just kind of moving on from that, what would you say are some core use cases for an MSP in leveraging Intune, in their practice, whether it be for project work or just ongoing proactive technology management?
Sorry, was that a question for me?
Yes. Yep. Sorry.
Okay, so do you mind repeating it? I
Yeah.
thought it was
Yeah.
a statement. I wasn't super paying attention.
No problem. So more so, some use cases as far as how an MSP would leverage Intune, whether it be a project work or also just on an ongoing basis for proactive technology management.
Sure. So project work. I'll give you an example of a project I'm currently doing right now. The MSP is the customer. MSP is my customer essentially, and they have it's a retail chain. There's like 40, 50 stores in the state, right? And what they're doing is they're moving, they have an AD environment that they have an old ERP system on it that has to be PCI compliant because they're dealing with credit card numbers and stuff like that, right? So the endpoints we're moving over to Entra and they're replacing all their endpoints store by store by store by store. Now, there's two different use cases. One is for the people, the workers, if you will, right? They don't have email, they don't need all that stuff. They simply just need to log into a machine, to log in, and then to get into this ERP system, to put in orders, and then whatever. And then there's a manager machine, which they have their own email and they have Office and whatever, right? So you have two different scenarios doing Autopilot on. Number one is kiosk mode. You guys ever done kiosk mode? They have device-only licensing for Intune because it doesn't care about the user, it simply cares about the device because there's a security baseline that's applied, right, from the PCI compliance perspective. Technically, that machine doesn't deal with PII, but you better be a little bit more secure than sorry, right? Because your order is not going to carry, it's still going to say pay out,
Right.
right? So that's going to be in kiosk mode because they simply have to do one thing, right? Automatically log the user in. It's a generic user. It doesn't matter. It's effectively like a thin client at that point. And it has a RDP shortcut that's on the desktop and everything else is locked off. They can't do anything. They double click, they log into RDP, right? They also have Duo for the RDP server because as you know, the Azure or the Microsoft Authenticator does not support MFA for console access, which they used to maybe 5 years ago. They had like an Azure MFA server you deploy. Not anymore. You can get creative with radius and do all these things, but again, same to our previous point, right? You deploy this really cool, fancy thing, but if you have no idea, or at least not a really good idea of how it works or how to support it, you're going to have a bad time, right? So you got kiosk mode, yeah, training PC, right? Same idea, right? If you've ever been to a mall and you see those big, huge displays that have like the map and says you are here, and here's Sephora, and here's Macy's, but that's a machine running in kiosk mode. It's simply just doing one thing. There's single app and there's multi-app, right? And then the manager machines are just user, the users have licenses for Intune because again, they're doing Office and they're doing other things. They want to install some applications and whatever, right? We're also pushing, they have data RMM that they're pushing. So that's another thing that we're doing as part of that Autopilot process. And that is going to be, again, fully managed, but it's a different profile. So we have two different sets of profiles for Autopilot, and they have different configurations going on both of them. They both have security baselines, but the manager machine needs Office. The regular user machine, the kiosk mode, doesn't need Office. So I just simply don't assign Office to that machine. That's it. So that's a current project that we're doing. So for ongoing maintenance, one of the things you can do is, let's say you have a user that calls in, and this is, I find a lot of MSPs get stuck in this. It's a very old legacy way of thinking. And I said, this, Alec is slow and this is happening. I can't install Adobe or whatever, right? And they spend 3 hours trying to fix it. Stop doing that, right? Do a fresh start, Autopilot reset. It wipes it back to factory. And then they sign it again, and it's like it was just from the factory. And then 20 minutes later, it's fixed. It's a brand new machine, right? Stop trying to fix these onesie, twosie kind of nonsense things. Just do a fresh wipe, right? I'll give you an example. SOP for Chase Bank. If they cannot fix the machine in 45 minutes, they replace it. That's it, right? There's no that's the metric, right? Once the time hits 45 minutes, if the issue is not resolved, they simply pull it out and put a new one in, which effectively is doing essentially the same thing, right? So the mindset of this ad hoc break fix thing, you got to get out of it, because you're going to get spinning your wheels, and you know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, I think, back to, this goes back to the early days of hiring technicians. One of the biggest questions, knowing when to throw in the towel. And I think one of the biggest challenges as, people as technologists is we don't want to give up. We don't want to fail. And, giving up or throwing in the towel isn't failure. It's just being efficient, and it's being wise and determining, there are better ways to do this. And, so I love that. Yeah. And
it's about time efficiency. So why did I do it for all tickets? Yeah, exactly. How do I fix my printer issues? Just throw them out. Just get rid of them. Don't worry about it. Right.
Right. Right.
You have to use your discernment, right? Because I'll give you an example. Let's say you do this and the same problem keeps occurring. There's something else you have to investigate, right? Maybe there's an issue with the original stock image of the machine. Maybe the installer, something's wrong with it, right? Then your discernment comes in and goes, oh, maybe we have to look a little further into this, right? But as just a knee-jerk reaction, because some people say, oh, it's just a knee-jerk reaction, just wipe it. Well, it depends on what school of thought you follow. But realistically, is that it's almost the age-old, like, just reboot it, right? And magically your problem goes away. And if it happens again, then there's something else you have to look at. That's kind of like the rule of thumb I think about when you talk about that stuff. But because I use the same principle with AVD, because I do a lot of AVD as well, right? If you have a weird problem, those machines are ephemeral. We don't care. Just make new ones. If the same challenge happens, then you take a further look at it. Maybe there's something on the image that's broken. Maybe there's a policy in Intune that's causing an issue, right? The same project, I'll go back to that. We're doing the security baseline. One of the things that ASR, which is attack surface reduction, right, blocks like macros and Office and all the stuff that a lot of known vectors for like ransomware and stuff like that, it blocks all that. They're using a tool called Smart DPK. And I'm like, what the hell is that? These are refurb machines. So what it does is it effectively wipes it from Autopilot. If it's in a previous, whoever originally bought the machine, it'll wipe all that information and effectively relicense it, which I was like, okay, that's cool, right? They're running off a USB stick. That's not a signed application. So ASR says, no. This is an unsigned application on a removable drive, no work, bad, right? We had to adjust for that. So those are things that, you know, not everything is going to work perfectly from a security baseline, because I'm sure like people have done like CAS hardening, and God forbid that you're doing fixed lockdown, or like if you're staking machines, if you're in a government environment, it's not if things break, it's what breaks, right? So
Yeah.
right. Yes, the Microsoft minute. I call that the cloud minute, but yes, I understand. So one of the things that I think Microsoft has really gotten better at is that the way that Autopilot functions, the MMP-C method of actually polling, it's a push-pull, right? So, I mean, it's not perfect, right? Some people, what they'll do is the only thing they'll do in Intune is they'll push the RMM, and then the RMM will start deploying apps from there, right? Some people like that model because they've spent 2 years or 3 years like kind of like tweaking that. But that's also like that you can fall into like the sunk time cost fallacy, right? Oh, well, I've spent 3 years for this. I just kind of keep using it. Meanwhile, there may be a more better, efficient, and effective way of doing it, right? That's just the sunk cost fallacy. So, but it's discernment. You know, you may have certain tenants that it takes a day to deploy something, because that does happen sometimes too, right? It's not a perfect science, right? It's written by people. So I've definitely seen it gotten better. And like maybe you said 5, 6 years ago, it was like, okay, this is taking forever. The pre-provisioning definitely helps. So I'll give you an example. So the OneDrive SharePoint library sync, they advertise that it takes up to 8 hours to work. Well, if I'm deploying machines on like 8 a.m. on a Monday and I need people to work, I can't wait till tomorrow for that to function, right? But that's what the pre-provisioning is for. So if you do autopilot, like you set up the machine and let it pre-provision and do all these things, and then you drop it on the user's desk, you can do that as well. If you find that starts to happen, because that can happen sometimes too.
Two quick things. One,
Sure.
going back to Jackie and the Microsoft Minute, I encourage everybody, regardless of whether it's something technical related or just overall productivity, set a timer, grab your phone, set a timer for 5 minutes.
Mhm.
And when that 5 minutes comes up, hit snooze for 5 more minutes. Continue to do that. You will be amazed on how fast that 5 minutes goes by. And again, this is just an exercise that, we should have every one of our technicians, every one of our employees do, because it really helps you just to understand how quick that time is. And the value of that time is so huge, right? I mean, I think we take for granted that time. We can't buy time, we can't get more time, we can reduce time, and we can determine when it makes sense to throw in the towel. The other quick thing, just a quick commercial break. For anybody new on this call, this is what we do each Wednesday, WTF Wednesday. We have a different business function expert. So WTF stands for what the function. So each week we
Yeah,
bring.
sure it does.
Yeah. Unless it's technical in nature, right? Then it's truly a WTF. But we talk about different business function issues each Wednesday. Fridays, and you can find all this under our resource tab at everythinmsp.com. Every Friday at noon Eastern time, we have our MSP discussion group where we talk about successes, challenges, changes that are occurring in the channel. It's more of that informal peer group, very casual, very open from that perspective. That is free as well. Thank you to all of our sponsors to make that happen. So I just want to make sure you guys are aware of those resources. And we've been doing these now. We're going to be going on 6 years doing these weekly calls. So then I want to jump over to Brad's point, and maybe you can elaborate a little bit more, Bill. Brad's point as far as the problem of doing like a fresh start that he talks about. He says that run into an issue with fresh starters that 10 people in the office, 7 of those just moved up here. 7 of those are all configured differently for their job responsibilities. So configuring the fresh start seems like it would be more involved than troubleshooting. It's not just Office and OneDrive. So there's some good points. You want to comment on that?
So my response to that is that how much manual configuration are you doing on those 7 different people outside of your baseline in Intune, because that's potentially where your gap is, right? So if you're finding that you're doing a lot of manual configuration, see how much of it you can offload that to do it in Intune. So that way, if you do a fresh start, if you still have those 7 different configurations, it doesn't matter because everything is all automated, at least to the best of your ability. So that is something you can analyze and say, okay, well, am I changing some reg keys or, whatever. So see what you can potentially offload to the tool. Like, let the tool do the work. I tell people I'm very lazy. I will find the most effective and efficient way to do something because I don't want to do more work than that is absolutely necessary. Right.
Yeah.
I think Bill Gates said that. He goes, I hire lazy people because they find really, really efficient ways to do everything.
I love it.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And I have a technician myself that, gets trapped into the old school mindset where, hey, it doesn't take me that long. It's just a couple clicks here, a couple clicks there. But
Right.
that's missing the point. If you're going to be doing some repetitive tasks and you're going to be doing things that are going to be over and over again, why not automate that, make it more efficient for you? Yeah, it might be only a few clicks here and there, but why? Why touch it? Remove those clicks, let it be automated, and where it makes most sense, and just let it go that route. Yes, there are going to be some, obscure situations where something is going to be so complex and, it doesn't make sense. If it's a one-off, that's why they're called one-offs. Yeah, you got to make that decision. But figure out ways in which you can be more efficient, and use technology to manage technology.
And it's also another point is that people also don't know what they don't know. Right. And I've seen things where, like, let's take like a Roost, for example, which is a great RPA tool. And then you say, well, I can pull all my machines from, I don't know, Kaseya, and then shove it into my my PSA to make sure I update my billing agreement if I'm doing per device, if the amount of devices change, run it every 30 days to make sure that the billing is accurate. And some people look at you and they're like, you can do that? You know what I mean? So like certain people don't really know, they don't know what they don't know. And you could see like when like they're like the light bulb goes off and they're like, wait, I could do this and I can, maybe I could do, and like, same point, right? Yeah, most can't create automations, exactly. Or they just don't know how to.
Yeah.
Or they don't know that they can do that, right? They don't know what they don't know. So I find that some of that gap there is that the legacy mindset, right? Or even like people that don't even use PowerShell for things. They're like, wait, I'll just click it. And like, well, certain things you can't do it. And yesteryear, like if you wanted to purge a deleted user in 365, you can't do it in the portal. You had to do it in PowerShell, right? Right. When you're doing soft matching, it's like, well, I'm still getting the user with the random 4 characters after there, and their password's not the same. Well, it's because it's in the recycle bin, right? And you can see it, but there's no delete button because they didn't understand that they have to use PowerShell to do that. That since has had functionality in the portal, but like certain things like that, even doing like onboarding and offboarding of users, you should not be doing any of that manually. Period. Any of that. Right? That's just another part of the stack, including the Intune piece of you onboarding a new person. You shouldn't be doing any of that like manually. Let the tool do it for you. Same thing with offboarding. Why do we have 85 users that still have licenses assigned that they're not here anymore? Well, because you don't have SOP for offboarding, right? That's costing you money, right? I find that some people, when you put it in dollars and cents terms, they tend to like, oh, yeah, no, you're spending an extra $3,000 a month in licensing that's doing nothing.
Right.
You know what I mean? So that's another perspective you can kind of come from.
Hey,
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
hey, so, well, I don't want to interrupt the thread here. I just have a question about licensing. Yeah, I'm right here at this point in time. I have a client that is a insurance agent for a big national insurance company. And he has 5 users, and been working with the insurance company support people, which are highly insufferable. They think that they're God to support, and
Like doctors.
and they know everything, and that I don't know anything. And so anyhow, I mean, long story short is that they've been trying 5 months to get these devices under Intune, and I think I know what the problem is. I think that it just comes down to that the agent is running apps for business because they've been up to where they up to the point before they needed Intune. That's all they needed because they just needed the apps to be able to log into the hosted email from, and services from the major insurance company. And so we had a little talk this the other day, and I'm like, these people need apps. I need a business premium or something like that with an Intune
Yep.
license. Oh, no, 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 no. They gave me all this bull. So anyhow, I just I want to confirm the licensing aspect.
Cool. Great question. So business premium, in my opinion, should be your gold standard. If you have customers that say, well, I can't spend the extra $6 a month for my 5 users, fire them. Right? Because they're going to cost you a lot more time and energy and effort and mind space than they're actually going to be a
But
profit and margin.
in this case, the good thing is the agent says, I just need my stuff to work. I don't care how much it costs.
Yeah,
Right.
those
And like
people
I
are
said,
fine, right?
you've got
But the
you've
ones
got
that
the
complain
insurance
about
agent
$7
support.
a month, it's like,
Yeah,
bro,
you've
like,
got the insurance agent support person said, no, they don't need those expensive licenses, blah blah blah. They're fixing to pull off. They've done like they've had me make the user an admin user. They've had me pull off Sophos because Windows Defender is fine, and that's all they should have. And so I mean, it's been a hard struggle, and I'm serious. 5 months they've been working on trying to get these machines enrolled in Intune.
so licensing, I compare it to like quantum physics, because quantum physics is actually fairly is easier to understand. So if anyone doesn't know what M365 Maps is, I put a link in the chat for it. It breaks down all the licensing and all the stuff you get with specific licensing. It's a really, really nice presentation. It's very straightforward. It's very streamlined. It's probably, yeah. Just wait till you get into cows and wait until you get into hybrid licensing in Azure. And wait until you get into VMware licensing, they break off VCF as BYOL. And the folks that are doing AVS now have to pay 140 grand a year just for licensing, and they only get a 15% reduction on the AVS host cost. Yeah, good luck. But so I typically use this as a reference, as a visual reference too, because it's nice and yeah, they don't even support, right? Exactly. So, but I typically will tell people business premium should be your standard, period. Right? And because in terms of the features that you get to the price per unit that you get it for, and especially if you're getting it from a CSP or if you are the direct CSP, you're getting it for 18, 19 bucks a user and you're making your, 9 to 12% margin on it, sure, because you can still charge customer retail for it's like $22 or something like that, $23, something like that. But you get a whole lot of stuff for it, right? You can also license Intune separately. There's Intune Plan 1, which effectively is what is in Business Premium. There's also Plan 2, and there's also the Intune Suite. And there's also the Entra Suite too, which but anyway. But there's certain things as EPM, which is endpoint, which is privilege management. So you can auto elevate if you haven't ever used like auto elevate to have a specific user elevate their privileges just for that process to install something, and then they go back to a standard user. Yeah, EPM is the feature as part of Entra Suite. They also have a remote help functionality as part of that suite, which effectively is the remote support, which is like their RMM. That's all baked onto the OS. It's all the Intune portal. So like if you want to like eventually like replace your RMM, that's something you could do it with in conjunction with the rest of the Intune stuff, if you will. So, but I always use that site as a reference.
The other thing,
fairly often.
the other thing I guess I would want to say too is to the client is Microsoft makes this available. It makes let me back up a little bit. We have a whole stack of tools that we're using to manage your technology. Now, we could add more. However, Microsoft makes tools available, part of 365, that we can leverage that are very cost effective. And if you didn't want to spend that extra $6 a month, we're going to have to add on additional tools that will cost you X dollars more for us to be able to do those things. And I don't know what that X dollars amount is, off the top of my head, something that, you just think through, but it is going to cost you 3, 4, 5 times more the dollars for us to be able to add these additional tools to manage it, in comparison to just leveraging what Microsoft makes available. So, it is less expensive for you, Mr. Client, and, just help them, understand the economics of it from that perspective. And I think they'll get it. The light bulb will go off and say, okay, that makes sense. And they'll proceed. Now, can we please everybody? No, of course not, unfortunately. But if we position it that way, I think they might understand it.
Well,
all about value, man.
just again to just say, like I said, in this case, it's not about the money. It's about the support people on
Sure.
the other side, not really
Yeah.
understanding, I think, what they think that they know. And
Right.
like I saw it from day one almost when it was having trouble. It's like, well, and I mentioned it, but they just, like I said, they passed that on as, oh, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. We're the
Yeah.
experts here. So, so I let him just fumble through it until, and every couple of weeks it surfaces back up that I have to get in touch with them and talk to them about it. So, we'll see. I'm thinking about just putting on a business premium license for one of those users, and then tell them, contact the insurance support people and have them try again and see if it works.
Yeah,
Yeah.
those are always my favorite too. And if someone makes an unsubstantiated claim, prove it. Okay, cool. Show me how to do it.
Right.
They won't. I don't have access to it. I can't do it right now. It's because you're wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You're-
one of the first guys I talked to, like I said, made me set the user to his administrative user, and I said, that's security 101. You just don't do that. Oh, I've been doing this for 40 years and I've never set this up this way. Okay, guy.
Yeah, it's always funny when people make the claim of years spent, and like, I've been doing this 20 years. You've been help desk for 20 years. That says a lot more about you than it does about me. Right.
Yeah.
So,
Right.
you're using your discernment there a little bit and you obviously don't want to be rude to people. You want to try to see their perspective and their point of view. But I mean, if they're flat out wrong, it's you're not just something like you're wrong, right? If they're being a jerk about it, I may no, you're wrong. You're lying, right? Or say, okay, great, show me, please, because I don't know how to do that. Show me how to do that, and they won't.
Yeah,
Right?
every phone call I go in with, I just want to help the client get what he needs.
Yep.
I've been managing this client for like 10 years. I know him. He's real good friends of mine. I don't want to see him suffer. But you guys on the other end, I can't work with you. You won't work with me. So anyhow, that's a different part of this situation. Like I said, I just need to confirm the licensing part. Sorry about that.
Right. That kind of doesn't turn into a technology problem, right? It's like, hi, you're the problem. It's you, right?
Yeah.
So I can understand that for sure.
So, Bill, when you take a look at for an MSP that's not currently using Intune, would you say it falls more into the camp that they're not sure where to use Intune versus the tools that they have in their stack right now, and they're at at that crossroads of, I'm not sure which makes most sense, or is it more so just not being familiar enough with them and not investing the amount of time that's really needed to better understand it, to leverage it?
Sure. And I want to answer the last question that was answered to after this. So I find that typically, if we follow the 80-20 rule, 80% of the time it's just ignorance. They just don't know. They just don't know it's available. They don't know what it can do. They don't know the depth of it, or whatever the case is. Typically, that's the case. They don't even know, like, the license that they currently already have has the ability to do it. Like, oh, we're paying for it. Yeah, you're paying for it, not using it, right? You're paying for a car in the garage you never drive. So it's like,
Right.
a lot of times that's where it comes down to. And a lot of people, I'll give you a quick scenario. I have a user that needs a 100 gig mailbox, which is EOP2. What do? They slap on an E3 license. Don't do that. Why? Because the enterprise is 20% more expensive for effectively the same thing, because you need more than 300 users to use it, right? No, just do a bolt-on for EOP2. It's the same price, right? Because if you're doing like O3, because the E3 is ambiguous, right? Office 365 is, Office, and that's it, right? OneDrive and SharePoint or whatever. But M365, which is M3, right? That's three things. It's O3 plus EMS E3, which is Enterprise Mobility Security, which is where the Intune part comes in, Azure RMS, which is email encryption, and some Purview stuff, and then a Windows 11 license. But then the price is another 10, 15 bucks a month. So for that $35 a month person, you just simply had to add another $8 a month for EOP2, and you would have gotten the same result. Actually, you would have gotten less if you paid more money. So it's like, that's why the map site is really very valuable. So, because people just don't know, because like if you don't do licensing like every day, it's hard to keep up because it's always changing. It's going to change next week. Seriously, because like Ignite is next week, I can almost guarantee you they're going to rebrand something. They are the kings of rebranding, right?
Right.
Last year they married all the Defender products, right? Microsoft Defender for Cloud, Defender for Cloud Apps, Defender for Identity. All of these things are separate things, right? And then Defender for Endpoint, DFE, which DFE comes with Business Premium. The EDR flavor, which only comes with DFE Plan 2, if you do it separately, comes with Business Premium. There you go. Get rid of get rid of your CrowdStrike if you don't really need it. Get rid of SentinelOne, right? It's all included. It works pretty well for the most part, but that's not the unmanaged Defender AV, right? It's the EDR functionality built into the Defender portal, which is security.microsoft.com. But anyway, so platform scripts run before Windows. I forget if there's a specific order, whether it's autopilot, non-autopilot. They do run in a specific order for autopilot. There's like stages of it. The compliance check runs first, that I know. I just don't recall. I have to look it up. I'm not sure. The answer is I'm not sure. I mean, I'm sure there probably is. I'd have to look at the reference document to tell you that. But okay, so Win32 apps default to that, right? You can do things. I'll give you another example, right? Deploying a shortcut on the desktop. You can do it as a PowerShell script, right? However, if you do it as a Win32 app and you wrap the PS1 and the install is PowerShell.exe, bypass current scope, period, backslash, whatever it is, .ps1. You could say, okay, how do I know this is actually installed? Well, if the icon exists in this directory and here's my shortcut, it worked. The PowerShell script, if you do it just as a PowerShell script, it only runs 3-4 times, and if it fails, it's never going to run again. So I try to do the Win32 app just as kind of a rule of thumb, unless you have a specific reason not to, right? Let's say if you do like deploying Office apps, there's like a built-in thing for that. Use that, right? Because it's effectively like the ODT tool built into the platform. Super easy, super straightforward. I want Excel and Word and blah blah blah, and I want 64-bit, and I want semi-annual channel, and then boom, done. Right. So that's what my that's typically what my answer for that is try to do the Win32 app by default as your rule of thumb, unless you have a specific reason not to.
Awesome. All right, everybody. We are at the top of the hour. Bill, thank you so much for all of your time and knowledge. Greatly appreciate it. Everybody else, thank you for being here today. And we do, for your information, we do have a webinar tomorrow. And I just want to pull up, make sure I can give you the right link here. Sorry, 1 second here. As I'm pulling this up, I also just want to make sure you guys know this Friday is our MSP discussion group call. It is every Friday at 12 noon Eastern time. So make sure that you join us for that. Tomorrow is at 1 p.m. Eastern time. And our special guest speaker is Ben Bernstein with Huntress. And our topic tomorrow is you can't patch people as much as we would love to, but you can manage their risk. And that's what we're going to talk about. So we're going to drill down into the granulars on that. If you go to everythinmsp.com, go into events, you can find that. But with that being said, everybody, have a great rest of your day, and we'll talk to you soon. Thank you again, Bill.
All right.
Thanks.
Bye.